A prototype of battle boots were playable at this year's BCX, the Brawlhalla Worlds, and from that we can get a little bit more insight into what to expect next month when it releases. Big thanks to Candy for reaching out to me with this information and footage. This video would not exist without them. Let's start off with the ground pound because big news, it's 100% confirmed that you can steer this move, similar to the Gauntlet's ground pound and the aerial drift. Now it might be a little bit hard to tell in this specific clip, also the interpolated frames, this mobile recording screens can be kind of weird, but this should illuminate it way more. This is a dash jump off of the main stage in the reverse direction, but you're still carrying all that momentum, which is something that you can really only do to this extent with the gauntlets. Now, this is something that was kind of unclear in the reveal trailer, but with this footage now we have 100% confirmation. Now, onto something that was shown in the reveal trailer, but now we have more information on it, is this activation hitbox. You can see Arcadia is actually getting hit before the full kit comes out. That's something you can do on gauntlets, on axe, on blasters as well. And apparently this hitbox is actually pretty sizable, so that's pretty nice. As for some other characteristics that aren't actually shown in this footage, but we do have confirmation from people that played it, is it does have a grounded splash variant, also similar to gauntlets, and you can kind of use it as a dodge punish or combo extending tool. This clip should give you an idea of how that might work. You're going to bounce them off the ground like that using the ground pound and then continue the combo or string by following their movement or something like that. It seems similar to the gauntlet's ground pound, but still quite unique in all that bouncing that you're going to be doing, so I'm excited to see how exactly it's going to work, how it's going to feel. Either way though, let's move on to the recovery. Now this move seems to be quite unique among all the other recovery moves in the game because the primary focus, I'm sorry, I'm giving you like whiplash showing you all these back to back, I'll slow it down real quick. The focus seems not to be about actually recovering, but attacking your opponent with a great hitbox and a lot of power. You can see it right here. This is interrupting the down air with just a vortex and the speed at which the opponent is launched. This is at 25% slowdown and it's that fast. They're just getting suctioned in and then completely launched. Now the drawback about this is that the distance you get is not great. Look at that. I mean, that's like one jump height. You're barely getting anywhere. Reminds me a little bit about Little Max up B, where you're just kind of just shooting up a little bit and then you fall down to your death. Now, obviously, this will have a lot more freedom than that, given that it's Brawlhalla mechanics and you're not just left into free fall, but you're barely getting any distance. And I think this clip really shows it right here because you're dipping down with momentum and then barely even making it over to the lip of the stage. It's not an instant burst of speed upward. You're dipping down with downward momentum first. We'll see if this property sticks around once it's fully finished. A lot of you might not know this, but orb recovery was very similar. It had a super short distance and it was pretty awful on release, and that made for not a great experience, so they buffed it around and swapped up the power to be more in line with other recoveries. By the way, you can still see this downward dip in momentum in this clip right here. But the last thing I want to mention before I forget is that downlight into recovery in this specific build, this might not be for the full build, is a true combo. I don't know if it's this specific one. I think it's the alternate downlight into recovery. This is one of the forward ones. We'll get into that later when we talk about active input. But for recovery to be this powerful of a move, to have a KO option directly to it is very good. It seems like the focus of these aerial heavies, ground pound, and recovery is much more about adding additional routes and attacks for the battle boots than just a straightforward I go up and then you go down, which is an interesting direction, and I'm curious to see how it plays out. Oh, and also before I forget, people were wondering, like, how do I throw the shoes if they're on my feet? You take the shoes off. Moving on now to the down air, which has two different versions. The first is just this downward kick, and the second is the downward kick with an added bounce to the end. Depending on where you want to go, you can active input and change things around. Now, I'm going to go over all the new information I have, but first, let's just take a look at the move. Visually and frame data-wise, it might appear similar to unarmed down air, but functionally, as you can see right here, with the bounce, it is quite different. Depending on how you want to follow up, where you want to go, what position you want to be in, you might opt to go for the bounce rather than continuing your momentum with the opponent, which might give you a follow-up like that. And the reasoning right here, you can see the bounce. It gives you the position to follow up potentially with a further move, and then this gives a string. You can see the Arcadia still jumps, so it is a string, it's not a true combo. Now this bounce, it's completely unclear whether or not it has any true combos or anything like that. It doesn't seem like it, but from that clip you can glean that it is a pretty good setup into a potential jump read with a ground pound. Now you might be curious what exactly I'm trying to show you with this clip right here. It's the aerial whiff. You kind of have to look closely because you hit the ground right after that, but it's the aerial whiff of the down air, which is something that we didn't see previously, and as you can tell right here, it does not have that much recovery time. You can attack right out of it. Now this is the grounded whiff. You can see it does have a grounded property similar to the unarmed down air, similar to Qatar down air, where you land, you do that superhero dive onto the ground, and maybe this has a little bit more recovery time. I'm not entirely sure, but you can see them back to back right there. And then they act out of it after a bit of a delay. So it does appear to have some recovery time. Maybe it's more on the ground than in the air. I don't know. I'm not going to count the frames from a mobile recording. That's demonic behavior. Also, I have to assume that everyone's doing everything frame perfect. I don't know what's going on. Either way, this is valuable information for while you're playing. Next up, we've got the sair, which also has two different versions. The first one, as you're going to see right here, you just stay in place as you're kicking. And the second one, you're moving alongside your opponent as you're kicking. This one is like the forward variant. It looks like a lot of fun. You're going coast to coast. A lot of the movement in this weapons kit looks like it's going to be from that sair, but it is more complicated than it seems. This version, the forward variant, has more fixed force, which basically means that the base knockback, ignoring any damage value, is going to be higher than the other version. And it makes sense because you're kicking alongside your opponent, they're always going to go a certain distance. But this version, the one where you stay in place, actually has more variable force. So variable force just means that it's going to scale more as your opponent gets damaged. When you hit them at 0%, it's not really going to hit them very far, but if you hit them at 100%, it's going to actually hit them further. So this might be a better knockout tool than the other one. And that's quite interesting. It means that you kind of have to pick and choose depending on if you want a knockout or if you want positioning. Keep in mind though that this is from very early testing and everything is still subject to change. So if this is no longer the case when the weapon releases, I'll let you all know. A couple more things that I have to mention. First is that this version, this forward variant, the one with more fixed force where you're continuing the kick on hit, is only on hit. You cannot use this move on its own and continue to kick unless you actually connect with your opponent. You're just gonna whiff and fall through the air like that right here. Now, something interesting about the whiff property of this move is that the hitboxes are gonna continue coming out. It's kind of like Gauntlet Dair, but once you actually connect, you're locked in place. Last thing I want to mention is that early reports suggest that the drift, the aerial control you have, is going to be similar to Sword Sair, but like I said, everything is subject to change. That might not be the case, so just keep that in mind with all of this. That is snacky. I'm back now. So the nair, it seems like I was actually pretty accurate in my initial assumption that it was kind of like Orb Nair. You can see right there, it doesn't really have that much recovery time. You're landing with that nair and then immediately starting with the nlight. And also like Orb Nair, you can carry momentum like that, and it's always going to hit upward, even if you hit with the downward portion of the kick. Now, this clip right here is to demonstrate that getting a true combo out of this might be a little bit difficult. This is a nair into recovery string, and you see the other person just dodges right out of it. I don't know if nair to sair is a tighter string or anything like that, but nair into recovery seems like one of those follow-ups where if you're reading where your opponent's going to jump like this clip right here, you might be able to get a clean follow-up out of it. So that's one of those things that you kind of have to be a little bit aware of. You might not get a full string. Now, this is very interesting because if we slow this way down, I'll show it one more time even slower, you're actually interrupting this down air hitbox with your own crescent moon. So the hitbox is very generous, even if the follow-up potential might not be. But if we're talking great follow-up potential, we got the downlight, which you can see the whiff version with the ledge cancel at the top right there. We do have HD footage of this from the reveal trailer with information on the active input as well. Yes, this does have active input. This first version is a forward swipe with the kick, and then you leap into the sky to potentially follow up. And then the other one is staying on the ground. Presumably, I'd think you're holding forward or maybe holding down with this. Not entirely sure. We'll know once we get our full hands on it. But either way, this is going to be a separate setup location for a different follow-up. So this, for example, is a setup, a true combo with the light version into the nair, where you're jumping into the air and then immediately going for a nair. You can also see maybe there's some hurtbox manipulation right there as you're ducking beneath a hitbox. It's very interesting. Also, like I mentioned earlier, true combo into recovery. Again, I don't know if this is a setup. I don't think it is. Presumably you go into the air for it, but for as strong as recovery is, and like I mentioned, it's designed to be more of an attacking tool, this is really, really strong. You saw in the first opening clip, you also carry a lot of momentum from a dash. I guess technically it was from a dodge, but you can presume that dash gives you a similar boost of momentum. So it's a super good combo tool because not only does it have movement inbuilt, it has active input and it has true combos as well. But downlight is not the only grounded setup tool. Sidelight is one as well. We can see a sidelight whiff right here into a downlight. That third kick, that's not the sidelight. Don't be fooled. That's the move we just saw. Sidelight is this double whirlwind kick. Okay, but just kidding. Sidelight actually does have a third kick. We can see it right here. And you might be thinking, if you've seen previous footage, what is this? This is unfamiliar. And that's because Sidelight 100% confirmed also has active input. That aerial kick, that might be the one you're more familiar with. Presumably you get this by holding forward. This is the one that was shown in HD in the trailer right here. We can see they get sent pretty far off stage as you continue the kick. Presumably it's a different route, a different setup location. And what's very interesting about the movement of this Sidelight is you can use it to GC recover like this. Now, something to keep in mind is you're not going to go as far if you don't actually connect with with your opponent, but you still do get a good amount of distance, and you completely stop your momentum in the air while traveling horizontally. One last thing that I want to mention about Sidelight that you might have picked up on already is that the hitbox is quite good. You can see it connecting right here kind of in the air, and in this next clip, it's going to be the down air into the Sidelight immediate wake up that we saw earlier, but look at how close this hits. Not only does it hit in the air, but it's also connecting somewhat stacked along this little swing of the kick. And finally, we have the nlight. We're almost done. This does not have active input as far as I know, and we can see the whiff version right here doesn't appear to have too many recovery frames, which does make sense. People said it's kind of similar to orb nlight, hammer. You can kind of see the comparison because this third kick only comes out once you connect the rest of it, but the hitbox is not too horizontally wide, and you also get stopped in place with some active frames, so it makes sense to not be stuck there forever. The reason why I'm showing you this footage from the reveal trailer is because Hattori is getting hit even in the air there. So if the horizontal hitbox is not the biggest, the vertical spread is quite generous. You can see this live footage right here of the very same thing, and there also is some variable force. In the orange there, they're getting sent halfway across the map. We can see more examples of the whiffing right here. They're acting pretty quickly out of it. Notably, look at the green one into an instant reverse downlight right away once they're out of it. That isn't to say though that you can't get punished for this move. You use it in the wrong spot, the wrong direction, the wrong range, and you're just going to be completely toasted, and that is not a position you want to be in. Now for the very keen observers among, I didn't say it, you thought about it though, you can kind of see what something strange is going on here. What is this? What is this movement? It kind of looks like one of those old animations for grounded dodges. My best guess is this is either a placeholder or working towards the final animation for backdash, Battle Boots' unique backdash animation, whatever that's going to be. It's a little hard to tell though since I didn't have my hands on it directly, and the timing, the frame rate, the quality of the video and all that is all something that you have to keep in mind when analyzing stuff like this. But that's it. That's all that I wanted to tell you about this exclusive footage. That's all I wanted to show you. Everyone say thank you, Candy, and the sprint animation is also Naruto run.